The receipt rested on the table between them. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The dinner crowd continued eating, but the people closest to the table had already noticed what was sitting beside the check. A $5 tip. That was all. Not because the service had been poor, not because the food had arrived late, not because the waitress had been rude. Everyone in that section had watched the same thing unfold over the past hour. They had watched Jacinta greet the customer with a warm smile that never looked forced. They had watched her catch a mistake from the kitchen before it reached the table, apologize without blaming anyone else, and return with the correct meal while somehow making the customer laugh. When he jokingly complained that the coffee tasted too serious, she had smiled and replied, "Sir, I think that coffee has attended more meetings than both of us." Even the nearby tables laughed. So did the man sitting across from her. That man was Thompson. His clothes were simple, but nothing about the way he carried himself looked ordinary. He sat with quiet confidence, speaking only when necessary and watching far more than he talked. There was something about him that made people curious without knowing why. Now he leaned back in his chair and calmly watched Jacinta walk toward the table to collect the receipt. She thanked him just as she thanked every customer. "Thank you for dining with us, sir. I hope the coffee behaves a little better next time." A few people chuckled again. Thompson offered a polite smile but said nothing. Jacinta picked up the check. She unfolded it. Her eyes moved across the receipt until they reached the bottom. $5. She stopped for only a heartbeat. Across the restaurant, someone quietly whispered, "Only 5?" Another customer frowned. After all she did for him? A woman at the next table slowly shook her head. She deserved much more than that. Someone else folded their arms and waited. Nobody looked back at their food anymore. Every eye had found its way to Jacinta. Some expected disappointment, some expected frustration, others expected the polite smile to disappear. Even Thompson expected something. He had walked into the restaurant with one purpose. He wanted to know whether kindness could survive disappointment. Money had made people perform for him all his life. Some smiled because they hoped for generous tips. Others treated him differently after learning who he was. Tonight, nobody knew. Tonight, $5 would answer a question that wealth never could. Jacinta looked at the receipt once more. She carefully placed it back on the table. She lifted her eyes to meet Thompson's. Neither spoke for a moment. The restaurant had become so quiet that even the soft clink of dishes from the kitchen seemed louder than before. Finally, Jacinta smiled. Not the smile of someone pretending, not the smile of someone hiding anger, just quiet grace. "Thank you, sir," she said gently. $5 can still help somebody who knows what to do with it. Silence. The whispers stopped. Even the customers who had expected an argument found themselves speechless. Thompson stared at her. He had prepared himself for annoyance. He had prepared himself for forced politeness. He had prepared himself for disappointment. He had prepared for almost everything. Everything except that. For the first time in a very long time, a stranger had answered one of his tests without trying to win anything. Before we continue, I'd like to offer a short prayer for everyone watching. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together today. Bless every viewer and their families with peace, wisdom, good health, and open doors. For anyone carrying heavy burdens, provide strength and hope. Let the story remind us that kindness, humility, and faith are never wasted. May we always choose character over pride and love over judgment. Amen. Welcome to Love, Money, and Secret, where America's greatest stories and life lessons meet creativity and heart. If you're new to the family, we're grateful to have you here. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps us bring more unforgettable stories your way. Also, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to know which city, state, or country you're joining us from. Finally, if someone rewarded your hardest work with only $5, how would you respond? Stay with us until the very end, because that same $5 bill will come to mean something no one in that restaurant could have expected. Hours later, the noise of the restaurant had been replaced by complete silence. Thompson stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse overlooking downtown Dallas. Thousands of lights stretched across the city below, but they failed to hold his attention. On a polished table nearby sat an expensive bottle of wine, that one of. His business partners had insisted he try. The bottle remained unopened. His phone vibrated. Another message. He ignored it. A few seconds later, it rang again. His assistant. He pressed the silence button without looking. The phone lit up once more. A board member reminding him about tomorrow morning's meeting. Ignored. Another notification. A private golf invitation from someone who always seemed eager to stand beside him whenever a camera was around. Ignored. He slowly loosened his tie and walked toward the large living room. The home was elegant. Everything had its place. The artwork had been chosen by professionals. The furniture had cost more than some families earned in years. The kitchen was filled with appliances he rarely used, yet the place felt strangely empty. He lowered himself into a chair and rested his elbows on his knees. His thoughts refused to stay inside those expensive walls. They kept returning to a small neighborhood restaurant, to one waitress, to one sentence. $5 can still help somebody who knows what to do with it. He whispered the words under his breath, once, then again. Each time they seemed to carry more weight. He had spent years believing he understood people. Money had given him opportunities few could imagine. It had also shown him how quickly some smiles disappeared when there was nothing to gain. He had met executives who praised him in public and criticized him in private. He had attended elegant charity dinners where generosity often came with photographers. He had shared meals with people who spoke about loyalty while quietly negotiating better deals for themselves. Over time, he had stopped trusting easy kindness. That was why he had started creating quiet tests. Nothing cruel, nothing meant to humiliate, just simple moments that revealed what money could not. Sometimes he dressed plainly, sometimes he visited places where nobody recognized him. Sometimes he listened more than he spoke. And tonight, he had left only $5. Not because Jacinta deserved less, because he believed disappointment revealed character. He expected frustration, a complaint, at least a look that said she felt insulted. Instead, she thanked him. Not with fear, not because she hoped he would change his mind. She thanked him because she meant it. That difference refused to leave him. He leaned back in his chair and looked toward the untouched wine. For the first time in years, success did not feel like an answer. It felt like a question. He quietly laughed at himself. The sound faded almost as quickly as it came. So that's what real confidence looks like, he murmured. His gaze drifted toward the Dallas skyline again. Somewhere beyond those lights, Jacinta was probably finishing her shift, catching a late bus home, or helping someone else before thinking about herself. She had walked away with $5. Yet somehow, he felt like the poorer person. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a message reminding him about a breakfast meeting with investors. He read the preview, then locked the screen. Business could wait. His thoughts could not. He stood and slowly walked back to the window. The city below never seemed to sleep. Neither, it seemed, would his mind tonight. He placed one hand in his pocket and spoke aloud, though no one else was there to hear him. I thought I was testing her. The words hung in the quiet room. A long breath escaped him. His reflection stared back through the glass. But she just exposed everything missing in me. He closed his eyes for a moment. Not out of exhaustion, out of honesty, because for the first time in years, a lesson had not come from a boardroom, a billionaire, or a business deal. It had come from a waitress who accepted $5 with grace. That night changed far more than a tip. It changed the man who left it. Now let us go back to where this story truly began. The day began long before sunrise. Jacinta's alarm buzzed at 5:30 every morning, though she was usually awake a few minutes earlier. Years of working restaurant shifts had trained her body to greet the day before the sun did. She stretched, smiled to herself, and quietly whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for another day." Those few words were part of every morning. They reminded her that she might not control everything waiting outside her front door, but she could choose the attitude she carried through it. Her apartment was small but neat. Nothing expensive decorated the rooms, yet everything had its place. She believed taking care of what she had was just as important as dreaming about what she hoped to have someday. She prepared a simple breakfast, packed a small lunch for later in the day, checked her purse twice, and counted her money. Bus fare. Enough for a modest meal if she became hungry after work. Nothing extra. She smiled anyway. Well, she chuckled softly, looks like my wallet and I are still practicing patience together. She locked the apartment and stepped into the cool Dallas morning. The neighborhood was already beginning to wake. A familiar older neighbor waved while watering flowers. Jacinta waved back with the same cheerful energy she offered everyone. Morning! Morning, sweetheart. Have a good day at work. I'm planning on it. Children waited at nearby bus stops with oversized backpacks. Someone across the street was already playing gospel music softly from an open window. The comforting smell of breakfast drifted from nearby homes, reminding Jacinta of countless Sunday mornings growing up. Her community had never been known for wealth. It was known for people. People who remembered birthdays without social media reminders. People who brought food when someone became sick. People who argued over whose macaroni belonged at the center of the cookout table. People who never let anyone leave church hungry. Jacinta often laughed that every family gathering came with three things everyone could count on. Someone would tell stories that became funnier every year. Someone would insist their recipe was still the best. And somebody would quietly wrap leftovers before the meal was officially over. Those simple moments reminded her that love rarely depended on money. At church, she had learned lessons that stayed with her every day. Treat people with respect, work honestly, keep your word, help when you can, forgive without becoming foolish. Those values followed her into every restaurant shift. When the city bus arrived, she climbed aboard and greeted the driver with the same warmth she shared with customers. "Good morning." "Morning, Jacinta." She found her usual seat beside the window. Dallas slowly passed outside as the bus rolled through neighborhoods, business districts, and busy intersections filled with people rushing toward another workday. Some passengers stared at their phones. Others closed their eyes for a few more minutes of sleep. Jacinta preferred watching the city wake up. Every face she saw reminded her that everyone carried a story nobody else could fully see. By the time the bus reached downtown, restaurants were beginning to prepare for breakfast customers. She stepped onto the sidewalk, adjusted her bag over one shoulder, and walked toward work with steady confidence. She enjoyed serving people. Not because every customer was pleasant. Far from it. Some arrived impatient, some complained before ordering, some expected perfection no matter how busy the restaurant became. Still, Jacinta believed everyone deserved respect, until they proved otherwise. Her coworkers often asked how she stayed so cheerful. She usually laughed before answering. "If I let every bad mood become my bad mood, I'd need a vacation before lunch." Her humor made difficult days easier, not only for herself, but for everyone working nearby. Across the city, another morning looked completely different. Thompson stepped out of a sleek black vehicle and entered the headquarters of the company he had spent years building. The lobby was polished from floor to ceiling. Employees greeted him respectfully as he passed. Meetings already filled his schedule. Investors wanted updates. Financial reports waited for approval. Several assistants followed closely, making sure every appointment remained perfectly timed. By mid-morning, he had already discussed property acquisitions, reviewed expansion plans, answered investment questions, and approved several major business decisions. His phone continued filling with invitations: a golf outing, a charity gala, an exclusive dinner, a private club gathering. Each invitation promised good company. Yet they all felt strangely similar. People smiled. People praised him. People complimented his success. But too often the conversations eventually circled back to what they hoped he might do for them. As another invitation appeared on his screen, Thompson quietly sighed. He looked through the large office window toward the streets below. Thousands of people filled the city. Somewhere among them, he wondered whether genuine kindness still existed when money wasn't part of the conversation. For reasons he couldn't fully explain, one simple thought settled into his mind. Tonight, he would skip another luxury restaurant. He wanted dinner somewhere ordinary, somewhere people weren't expecting a billionaire to walk through the door. By early evening, the restaurant had found its rhythm. Plates moved from the kitchen to the dining room, glasses were refilled, orders were called out, customers came in tired from work, hungry, from errands, or simply looking for a place to sit down and be treated kindly for an hour. Jacinta moved through it all with practiced calm. She carried 2 plates to one table, checked on another, greeted a couple near the window, and still noticed when a customer at the counter looked confused by the menu. "You look like that menu is trying to test your faith," she said with a smile. The customer laughed. Jacinta pointed lightly. "Try the grilled chicken. Safe choice, won't hurt your feelings." That was how she worked. Quick, warm, funny without being careless, respectful without acting weak. A little later, the front door opened, and Thompson stepped inside. He paused just past the entrance. The place was nothing like the private dining rooms he usually entered. No one rushed forward with a special greeting. No one whispered his name. No one offered him a corner table because of his bank account. A host guided him to Jacinta's section. Jacinta approached with a menu and her usual bright smile. "Good evening, sir. Welcome in. First time with us?" Thompson glanced up. "That obvious?" "Only a little," she replied. "Regulars usually know which chair complains the least." He looked at the chair beneath him. "This one complains? Not yet, but give it time. Dinner rush brings out everybody's personality." For the first time that day, Thompson smiled without forcing it. "I'll keep that in mind." She handed him the menu. "My name is Jacinta. I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with something to drink?" "Coffee." Jacinta tilted her head slightly. "At dinner? Long day? Then I'll bring the kind strong enough to file paperwork." Thompson gave a quiet laugh. "That sounds useful." She returned a few minutes later with the coffee and set it down carefully. He took one sip and made a face. Jacinta noticed immediately. "Too strong?" He lowered the cup. "It tastes serious." She nodded as if she understood completely. "Sir, that coffee has been through more meetings than both of us." A man at the next table laughed into his napkin. Thompson looked at Jacinta, surprised by how natural she sounded. Not rehearsed, not nervous, not trying too hard. Just herself. "What do you recommend?" he asked. "Depends," she said. "Are you trying to eat like you had a peaceful day, or are you trying to recover from one?" "Recover? Then you need something warm, filling, and honest. I'd go with the chicken plate. Nothing fancy, but it does its job." "Honest food," Thompson said. "Best kind." He closed the menu. "I'll take that." The order went in, and Jacinta continued moving from table to table. Thompson watched without making it obvious. She treated everyone with the same attention. An older customer received patience. A tired mother received encouragement. A man who complained about waiting received a calm apology, even though the delay clearly was not Jacinta's fault. When Thompson's food arrived, Jacinta carried it out herself. Before placing it down, she looked at the plate and stopped. "This isn't right." Thompson looked at it. "It isn't?" "No, sir. You ordered the chicken plate with the side changed. This still has the original side." "It's fine." "No, it isn't. You asked for something specific. You should receive what you asked for." She lifted the plate back up. "I'll fix it." She returned to the kitchen without making a scene. No blaming, no loud complaint, no embarrassed rush. A few minutes later, she came back with the corrected order. "Here we are, warm, honest, and now properly dressed." Thompson smiled again. "You handled that well. It was just a side dish. Some people would have blamed someone else." Jacinta shrugged gently. "Blame doesn't make food arrive faster." That answer stayed with him. As he ate, she checked on him without hovering. She refilled his coffee before he asked, brought extra napkins, and made sure his meal was right. She did it all with the same steady grace she gave every table. Still, Thompson had lived long enough to question what he saw. Was this who she truly was? Or was she simply excellent at surviving customers? He watched her thank a family leaving with small children. He watched her smile at a customer who barely looked up from his phone. He watched her carry herself with dignity even when the shift grew busier. And her feet must have been aching. By the time the bill arrived, Thompson already knew she deserved more than an ordinary tip. That was exactly why the thought came to him. If kindness remained only when rewarded, it was performance. If kindness remained when disappointed, it was character. He reached into his wallet. There were larger bills inside, much larger. His hand paused over them. Then he took out one $5 bill. He placed it neatly beside the receipt. Not because Jacinta had failed, because he wanted to know what her kindness was made of. Across the dining room, Jacinta finished helping another table and turned back toward him. Thompson leaned back quietly. The test had already begun. Jacinta crossed the dining room with 2 empty plates balanced in one hand and a small stack of napkins in the other. She had no idea Thompson had already made his decision. To her, he was simply another customer finishing dinner after a long day. He had been quiet but respectful. A little serious, maybe, but not difficult. She had handled his order, corrected the kitchen mistake, kept his coffee filled, and given him the same care she gave every table in her section. When she reached him, Thompson had already signed the receipt. "Everything all right for you, sir?" she asked. "It was," he said. "I'm glad to hear that." Her eyes moved to the table. The receipt sat beside one folded bill, $5. For a second, her fingers slowed. Not enough for anyone careless to notice. But Thompson noticed. So did the customers sitting close enough to see the bill. Jacinta picked up the receipt and the money together. She did not count it twice. She did not sigh. She did not press her lips together. She simply looked at it, accepted what was there, and placed it carefully inside her server book. At the table beside them, one customer whispered, "That's all he left her?" Another voice answered quietly, "After she fixed his order and kept checking on him?" A third person leaned closer to the table and muttered, "Some folks just like being cheap." Jacinta heard enough to know people were watching. She also knew a moment like that could make or break the atmosphere in the room. If she showed anger, the whole restaurant would feed on it. If she embarrassed him, people would laugh, but she would walk away feeling smaller than before. If she begged, she would lose something more valuable than money. So she chose dignity. She looked at Thompson with calm eyes. "Thank you, sir," she said gently. $5 can still help somebody who knows what to do with it. As he passed the next table, one customer looked at him with open judgment. Thompson did not respond. He had enough money to defend himself with pride, but for the first time that evening, pride felt useless. The nearby whispers stopped. Thompson's face changed, not dramatically, but enough. His shoulders settled. His eyes stayed on hers a little longer than before. He had expected irritation. He had expected a forced smile. He had expected the kind of politeness people use when they want to. Hide disappointment. But Jacinta's words carried no bitterness. That unsettled him more than anger would have. She gave him one final respectful nod. "You have a safe evening." Then she turned and continued her work. No show, No complaint, no performance, just grace. Thompson remained seated for several seconds after she walked away. The restaurant slowly returned to its normal sound, but he did not return with it. A fork tapped against a plate somewhere nearby. A chair moved back. Someone laughed near the front counter, yet all he could hear was one sentence. $5 can still help somebody who knows what to do with it. He rose from the table, adjusted his jacket, and walked toward the exit. At the door, he glanced back. Jacinta was already helping another table. She smiled at a tired customer, pointed toward the menu, and said something that made the person laugh. She had not changed. Not toward him, not toward the room, not toward herself. That was the part that followed Thompson outside. Before we continue, family, if this moment touched you, please take 1 second to like this video, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters, and subscribe to Love, Money, and Secret. Also, tell us in the comments what you would have done in Jacinta's place. Would you have stayed calm, or would that $5 tip have tested your patience? Outside, Thompson stepped into the Dallas evening and entered his vehicle. The driver asked, "Home, sir?" Thompson looked through the window at the restaurant lights. "Yes," he said quietly. "Home." The vehicle pulled away from the curb. Dallas moved past in glowing signs, busy sidewalks, and streams of traffic. Thompson usually used quiet rides to answer messages, review numbers, or prepare for the next meeting. Not tonight. His phone stayed in his hand, screen dark. He kept seeing Jacinta's face when she picked up the receipt. That small pause, that calm smile, that sentence. He had tested many people in small ways over the years, but most of those tests had ended by confirming what he already believed. People often changed when money appeared. People often changed when money disappeared. Jacinta had not changed. That bothered him because it was beautiful. It bothered him because it was rare. Most of all, it bothered him because he had given her less than she deserved just to answer a question inside himself. The vehicle stopped at a red light. Thompson looked out at a bus rolling past in the next lane. For the first time, he wondered how Jacinta would get home after her shift. He wondered how long she had been on her feet. He wondered what $5 meant to someone who knew how to stretch every coin without losing her smile. The light changed. The vehicle moved forward. Thompson leaned back and closed his eyes. He had walked into that restaurant believing he was studying her character. But as the Dallas streets carried him home, he began to suspect the deeper test had not been for Jacinta at all. It had been for him. The next morning, Thompson woke earlier than usual. His schedule was already full before he reached the office. Investors, expected answers. A property deal needed final approval. A charity committee wanted his appearance confirmed. A private club had sent another invitation, this time with a note saying several important people hoped to see him. He read the messages one by one. None of them held his attention. By 10 o'clock, he was seated at the head of a long conference table while several people discussed figures, timelines, and projected profit. On most days, Thompson could listen to a business proposal and catch every weak point before the speaker reached the final page. That morning, his mind drifted. Not because the numbers were unimportant, because one sentence kept walking into every quiet space in his thoughts. $5 can still help somebody who knows what to do with it. He tapped one finger against the table. Across from him, someone continued explaining a project that would cost millions. Millions. The word almost made him uncomfortable. The night before, he had left $5 for a woman who had shown more patience in 1 hour than some executives showed in a year. He did not like that feeling. Not because anyone had corrected him, because nobody had to. Jacinta had not insulted him. She had not chased him outside. She had not spoken loudly enough to embarrass him. She had simply accepted the small tip with a kind of calm that made his wealth feel less impressive. For the rest of the week, the feeling followed him. At a luxury dinner, he sat across from people laughing at jokes that were not funny. Someone praised his business instincts. Someone else asked about a possible investment. A man leaned close and spoke warmly, but Thompson could hear the request before it was spoken. He smiled politely. He answered when necessary. Still, all he could think about was the restaurant. At a charity gala, cameras flashed while guests spoke about generosity. Thompson watched people pose beside donation boards and shake hands as if kindness needed a spotlight to become real. He thought of Jacinta again. No camera, no applause, no reward, just $5 in grace. By the end of the week, Thompson stopped pretending the memory would leave on its own. On Friday evening, instead of going to the private dinner already marked on his calendar, he told his driver to take him back to the same restaurant. When he walked in, the place looked almost exactly as it had before. Busy tables, warm food, low laughter, workers moving quickly from one customer to another. Jacinta stood near the counter, writing something on a small order pad. When she looked up and saw him, recognition crossed her face. Only recognition, no anger. No surprise meant to flatter him, no coldness. She walked over with her usual professional smile. "Good evening, sir. Back again?" Thompson nodded. "If the chair still has no complaints." Jacinta glanced toward the same section where he had sat before. "That chair survived the week. You might be safe." A quiet laugh escaped him. "I'll take my chances." She guided him to a table and placed the menu down. "Coffee again?" He looked at her carefully. "You remember?" "I remember most customers who accuse our coffee of being too serious." That was a fair accusation. "It has been trying to relax," she said, "but I can't promise miracles." Thompson smiled wider than he expected. "Coffee, please." "Coming right up." As she walked away, he watched her greet another table, refill a drink, and answer a question from a customer near the aisle. Nothing in her manner suggested she was treating him differently because of what had happened days earlier. That unsettled him in a different way. If she had been bitter, he would have understood it. If she had been overly sweet, he might have suspected she recognized money even through simple clothing. Instead, she was steady. When she returned with the coffee, she placed it down and said, "Careful, it has a serious reputation to protect." He lifted the cup. "I'll respect that." Their conversation remained light that evening. He asked what meal she recommended. She asked whether he was recovering from another long day. He admitted that he probably was. She recommended something simple again, saying, "Fancy food is fine, but sometimes a person just needs dinner that doesn't need an explanation." He laughed. During the meal, Thompson paid closer attention to what he had missed the first time. Jacinta was not kind because it benefited her. She was kind because that was how she chose to move through the world. When a customer spoke sharply, she answered calmly. When an older guest struggled to read the menu, she leaned closer and helped without making the person feel embarrassed. When a child dropped a fork, she brought another one with a smile and said, "That fork clearly wanted freedom." The child giggled. Thompson found himself smiling too. Over the next several visits, he requested her section whenever she was working. He never announced who he was. Jacinta never asked. Their conversations grew slowly, piece by piece. He learned she worked long shifts without making her tiredness everyone else's problem. She learned he had a habit of answering questions carefully, like a man, used to people searching for weakness in every word. One evening she asked, "Do you always think this much before you speak?" He looked amused. "Is that a complaint?" "No, sir, just an observation. Some people talk like they're throwing plates. You talk like you're checking every plate for cracks first." "That might be accurate. Must be exhausting. It can be." She nodded, then placed his drink on the table. "Well, this is a restaurant. Around here you're allowed to say a regular sentence and survive." Thompson laughed, and this time he did not hide how much he enjoyed it. Another night, he asked whether she liked her work. Jacinta paused only long enough to choose an honest answer. "I like serving people. I don't always like how people treat servers." "That sounds fair." "It teaches you a lot about character," she said. "Some people show you who they are by how they speak to somebody carrying their food." The words landed gently, but Thompson felt them deeply. He wondered whether she knew how close that came to him. If she did not show it. That was the strange thing about Jacinta. She had a way of telling the truth without using it like a weapon. By the end of the week, Thompson no longer returned only because of curiosity. He returned because the restaurant felt more honest than many rooms where people wore expensive suits. He returned because Jacinta made him laugh without asking him for anything. He returned because she treated him like a person, not a prize. And Jacinta, though careful with her heart, began noticing things too. He listened. He remembered small details. He never raised his voice. He did not interrupt her when she spoke. He thanked her like he meant it. That mattered. One Friday night, as she placed his bill on the table, Thompson looked up and said, "Jacinta, may I ask you something?" She folded her hands lightly over her order pad. "You may ask, I may answer." He smiled. "That seems fair." "Very fair." He glanced around the restaurant, then back at her. "How do you stay kind when people don't always return it?" Jacinta's smile softened. She did not answer quickly. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet enough that only he could hear. "Because if I let people rent space in my spirit for free, I'd be broke in places money can't fix." Thompson stared at her. There it was again. Not performance, not bitterness. Wisdom. He nodded slowly. "That might be the most valuable thing I've heard all week." Jacinta gave him a playful, "Careful now, compliments don't pay the light bill." For a moment they both laughed, but under the laughter something had changed. Their conversations were no longer only between a customer and a waitress. They were becoming something warmer, something careful, something neither of them was ready to name. By the third week, Thompson had become familiar with Jacinta's section. Not loud familiar, not the kind of customer who acted like the restaurant belonged to him because he had been there more than twice. He simply came in, waited if her tables were full, ordered coffee that Jacinta still called too serious, and listened when she spoke. Jacinta noticed that about him. Most customers asked questions only to fill silence. Thompson listened like her answers mattered. One evening, the restaurant slowed down after the dinner rush. Jacinta stopped by his table with a fresh cup of coffee and said, "You know, sir, I'm starting to think you don't come here for the food." Thompson looked up. "That obvious?" "A little," she said. "Nobody eats the same chicken plate this many times unless they're either loyal or afraid of the rest of the menu." He laughed quietly. "Maybe both." Jacinta smiled. "Well, loyalty is welcome. Fear of seasoning is something we can work on." That made him laugh again, and she liked that his laughter no longer sounded guarded. He asked, "What do you do when you're not here making fun of customers' dinner choices?" "I go to church, help when I can, attend cookouts where everybody claims their potato salad is the only one approved by heaven." Thompson leaned back. "That sounds serious." "It is. In my community, you don't play with food, church seats, or foil pans." "Foil pans?" Jacinta's eyes widened, like he had asked a dangerous question. "Sir, please don't disrespect the foil pan. That's where the good food travels." "I didn't know foil had rules." "It has many rules. If a dish is covered in foil, you wait for the person who brought it to open it. You don't just go lifting corners like you own land." Thompson shook his head, smiling. "I'll remember that." "You better. Dallas aunties don't forgive foil crimes easily." The more they talked, the more Thompson saw a world different from his own. Jacinta told him about church events where people arrived early to set up chairs, serve food, check on elders, and make sure children had something to eat before the grown folks started talking too long. She spoke about community service with pride, not pity. "Some people think helping means you have extra," she said one night, "but sometimes helping just means you remember what it felt like to need somebody." Thompson grew quiet at that. He had donated large amounts to charity over the years. His name had been printed on programs, engraved on walls, and mentioned at galas. Yet Jacinta spoke about service like it was part of breathing. No stage, no praise, just people taking care of people. Another evening, she told him about neighborhood cookouts. "You ever been to one?" she asked. "Not the kind you're describing." "Then you haven't lived. What happens?" "Food, music, too many opinions, children running everywhere, somebody arguing about dominoes, and at least one person guarding paper plates like they bought them with gold." "Paper plates need guarding too?" "Yes," Jacinta said firmly. "Because somebody will take 5 plates for one meal. That is how supplies vanish." Thompson smiled. "I had no idea paper plates were part of community security." "They are. Plates, cups, napkins, foil. Respect the system." Their conversations became a gentle part of both their lives. Jacinta still served other tables. Thompson still stayed polite, but when she had a quiet moment, she often stopped by long enough to share something small and real. In return, Thompson began opening parts of himself he usually kept locked away. He told her about business dinners where people laughed too loudly at his jokes. He told her about private clubs where the handshakes felt warm but the motives felt cold. He told her about golf invitations that always came from someone who needed a favor by the 9th hole. Jacinta listened without acting impressed by his wealth. "So, people treat you like a walking wallet?" she asked. Thompson paused, then nodded. "Sometimes. That must be lonely." He looked at her carefully. Most people heard the word billionaire and forgot that loneliness could still reach a man living in luxury. Jacinta did not. "It is," he admitted. She rested one hand lightly on the back of the empty chair across from him. "Well, money can buy a lot, sir, but it can't buy somebody laughing with you for real." "No," he said softly. "It can't." From that night on, something shifted. Their talks became less about polite service and more about trust. Thompson did not try to impress her with expensive stories. Jacinta did not try to make herself look pitiful so he would feel sorry for her. They met somewhere in the middle, a waitress who understood dignity, a billionaire who was beginning to understand humility. And slowly, through coffee jokes, foil pan lessons, paper plate warnings, church stories, and honest conversations, respect became friendship. Not rushed, not forced, just real enough that both of them noticed. The first time Thompson noticed, Jacinta did not know he was watching. It happened on a Saturday evening after one of the busiest shifts of the month. The restaurant had stayed full for hours, and Jacinta had moved through the crowd with the same steady patience that had first caught Thompson's attention. By closing time, most customers had left. Thompson remained at his table, finishing the last of his coffee while pretending to check a message on his phone. He was not trying to spy on her. He was only waiting until she had a free moment so he could say goodnight. Near the counter, Jacinta counted the tips she had earned that day. She separated the money carefully. One small stack went into her purse, another stack went into the pocket of her work apron. A few bills she folded neatly and slipped into a plain envelope. Thompson noticed the envelope because of the way she handled it, not casually, not like extra spending money, like something already promised before it reached her hand. A few minutes later, a tired-looking customer came back inside. The person spoke quietly to Jacinta near the front, too low for Thompson to hear clearly. Jacinta listened, nodded, and reached into her apron. She pulled out part of the money she had just separated and gently placed it into the person's hand. No announcement. No big smile asking to be praised. No speech, just help. The customer wiped their face, thanked her, and walked out. Jacinta returned to cleaning a table as if nothing unusual had happened. Thompson sat still. He had seen wealthy people give money in front of cameras. He had seen donors wait for applause before opening their wallets. He had seen generosity turned into a social event. But this was different. Jacinta gave from what she needed, not from what she had left over. The next week, he noticed it again. A small envelope tucked into her bag. A quiet conversation near the back hallway. A few dollars passed to someone who looked embarrassed to ask. Another time, after her shift, he saw her leave with a modest grocery bag in one hand instead of taking the bus right away. She stopped outside. Near someone seated on a bench, handed over the bag, shared a few kind words, and walked away before the person could make a scene out of thanking her. Thompson did not mention it at first. He respected her too much to turn her kindness into his discovery. But the more he saw, the more humbled he became. One evening, after the dinner rush had slowed, Jacinta came to his table and noticed he had barely touched his meal. "Now don't tell me the chicken offended you," she said. "No," Thompson replied. "The chicken did nothing wrong." That sounds like something a guilty man says before blaming the side dish. He smiled, but only briefly. Jacinta studied his face. "You're thinking heavy tonight. I saw something. That sounds serious. I saw you helping people." Her expression changed, not with fear, but with caution. Thompson quickly added, "I wasn't trying to intrude." Jacinta looked down at the table for a moment, then back at him. "It's not something I talk about." "I understand." "No, sir," she said gently. "I don't think you do." He accepted that without offense. "Then help me understand." Jacinta sat across from him for the first time since they had met. The restaurant was quiet enough now that no one needed her immediately. She folded her hands on the table. "Some people around here are one missed shift away from hunger, one medical bill away from choosing between lights and groceries, one broken car away from losing a job. I can't fix everybody's life." She gave a small, tired smile. "But if I can help somebody eat tonight, I do that." "With your own tips? What else do I have?" Thompson's voice lowered. "Jacinta, you work long shifts. You need that money too. I know. Then why give it away?" She looked at him calmly. "Because I know what it feels like to need help and still want to keep your dignity." That answer moved something inside him. He leaned back ashamed again, but not in the same way as before. This time, the shame came with respect. "You don't tell anyone?" "No." "No posts? No attention?" Jacinta almost laughed. "Sir, I barely have time to sit down. I'm not arranging a camera every time I do the right thing." Thompson smiled, but his eyes remained serious. "Most people with far more than you give far less. That's between them and God." He nodded slowly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The restaurant sounds filled the space between them, dishes being stacked, chairs being moved, soft voices from the kitchen. Finally, Thompson said, "May I ask you something important?" Jacinta lifted one eyebrow. "You've been asking questions since you found out foil pans have rules, but go ahead. What do you really want from life?" She did not answer immediately. That question was too big for a quick joke. She looked toward the front window where Dallas traffic moved beyond the glass. "I want stability," she said. Thompson listened. "I want to wake up and not have every bill feel like a fight. I want to work somewhere people are treated like human beings, not replaceable hands. I want respect without having to beg for it." Her voice stayed steady. "And I want a chance to build something meaningful, something honest, something that can help more than just me." Thompson absorbed every word. Not a mansion, not jewelry, not luxury trips, not a life built around being seen beside a wealthy man. Stability, respect, a chance. He had tested her once with $5, thinking money could reveal her character. Now he understood something deeper. Money could not measure Jacinta. It could not buy her heart. It could not replace her values. It could only become useful if placed in service of something bigger than pride. He looked at her across the table, and for the first time he did not see a waitress whose kindness had surprised him. He saw a leader who had never been given the room to stand fully in her purpose. "Jacinta," he said quietly. You deserve more than survival. She gave him a careful look. I don't need pity. I know. I'm serious. So am I, he said. That is not pity, that is recognition. Jacinta held his gaze. Something passed between them then. Not a promise, not romance spoken too soon, but the beginning of a door opening. And this time, Thompson knew better than to push it open with money. He would have to earn the right to walk through it with respect. The change began quietly. At first, it was only a few looks. When Thompson walked into the restaurant and asked for Jacinta's section, certain workers behind the counter exchanged glances. When? Jacinta brought him coffee. A customer nearby watched too closely. When Thompson laughed at something she said, someone whispered before pretending to check a menu. Jacinta noticed. She always noticed more than people thought, but she did not feed it. She kept serving tables, correcting orders, carrying plates, and treating every customer with the same respect she had always shown. One afternoon, as she refilled water glasses near the back table, she heard a low voice behind her. Must be nice having a rich customer coming back all the time. Another voice replied, She probably knows exactly what she's doing. Jacinta paused only long enough to steady the pitcher in her hand. She did not turn around. She did not snap back. She finished filling the glasses, smiled at the customers, and walked away with her head high. Later that evening, Thompson saw the weight in her eyes, even though her smile remained polite. You're quieter today, he said when she brought his coffee. Jacinta placed the cup down carefully. Some days are louder on the inside. He studied her face. Did something happen? She gave a small shrug. People talk. About you? About you coming here, about me serving your table, about things. They don't understand but feel comfortable judging. Thompson's expression tightened slightly. Jacinta noticed and lifted one hand. No, sir, don't go turning into a courthouse on my account. That almost made him smile. I wasn't planning on becoming a courthouse. Good, because I don't need revenge, I need peace. He leaned back slowly. Do they think you want something from me? Some do. And what do you say? I say nothing. Nothing. Jacinta nodded. People who already made up their minds don't need my explanation. They need their own mirror. That answer stayed with him. But Thompson was beginning to understand something else. The rumors were not the only problem inside that restaurant. Over the next few visits, he paid closer attention. Not to gossip, to patterns. He noticed one worker staying late after the dining room closed, still cleaning tables while looking too tired to stand straight. He noticed another quietly checking a schedule posted near the back, then rubbing their forehead like the hours did not match what they had expected. He noticed Jacinta being asked to handle extra tables when the floor became busy, yet no one seemed to acknowledge the added pressure. He started asking careful questions. Not loud questions, not threatening questions. Simple ones. How often do you work double shifts? Jacinta looked at him carefully. Often enough. Do you get paid properly for the extra time? She gave him a look that answered before her mouth did. Thompson, I'm asking. I know what you're asking. And? She lowered her voice. Some things around here are not handled right, but people need jobs, so they stay quiet. That sentence told him more than she intended. He did not push her to say names. He did not ask her to risk herself. Instead, he began doing what he knew how to do best. He observed. He checked public business records. He reviewed employment, complaints connected to the restaurant group. He spoke with people who understood labor rules in Dallas without turning Jacinta into the center of the matter. He requested documents through proper channels and compared schedules with pay practices where he could. What he found did not please him. Workers were being treated unfairly. Extra hours were not always recorded correctly. Breaks were often ignored when the restaurant became busy. Some employees were spoken to like they should be grateful for being exhausted. The disrespect was not always loud. Sometimes it hid inside scheduling. Sometimes inside missing overtime. Sometimes inside small comments meant to make workers feel replaceable. Thompson had seen unfairness in business before. He knew how people in power defended it. They called it pressure. They called it tradition. They called it how things had always been done. But wrong did not become right because it had been practiced for a long time. One evening, he arrived later than usual and found Jacinta wiping down a table with slower movements than normal. You should be home, he said softly. She glanced up. So should you. I mean it. So do I. He looked toward the nearly empty dining room. How long was your shift today? Long enough for my feet to start asking for separate legal representation. Despite himself, he smiled, but his eyes returned to the tiredness in her face. This place asks too much. Jacinta continued wiping the table. This place asks what people are afraid to refuse. That was the sentence that made his decision final. He would not embarrass her. He would not walk in waving money and making himself the hero. He would not create a public scene that left workers scared and managers defensive. Justice needed more than emotion. It needed proof. So Thompson kept gathering documentation, schedules, pay patterns, worker statements when people were willing to speak, records that could not be dismissed as gossip. Jacinta knew he was doing something even before he told her. "You've been asking careful questions," she said one night. "I have. Are you about to cause trouble?" "No," she raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" "I'm about to make sure people are treated correctly. That sounds like trouble wearing a clean jacket." He laughed quietly. It might feel that way to anyone who benefited from silence. Jacinta looked at him for a long moment. There was concern in her eyes, but also respect. "Just don't make me look helpless." His answer came immediately. "I won't. Don't make this about saving me. I won't. Don't turn my life into somebody's business story." Thompson leaned forward slightly. "Jacinta, this is not about pity. It is about accountability." She held his gaze. That word mattered. Accountability, not revenge, not noise, not pride. For the first time, she allowed herself to breathe a little easier, because Thompson was not trying to make her smaller so his help could look bigger. He was learning to stand beside her without standing over her. By the end of that week, the right people had been contacted. Documents had been prepared. Questions had been raised in places the restaurant ownership could no longer ignore. The same workplace that had quietly dismissed tired workers now had to answer for how those workers had been treated. And Jacinta, still wearing her apron, still carrying herself with grace, did not celebrate anyone's downfall. She simply kept working with dignity while justice began moving toward the door. The first sign of change came through a meeting nobody expected. It happened before the dinner rush, when the dining room was still quiet and the staff were preparing tables, checking menus, and getting ready for another long evening. Jacinta was folding napkins near her section when the restaurant ownership requested that workers gather near the front. A hush moved through the room. Some employees looked nervous. Others looked tired enough to expect another speech about working, harder with fewer complaints. Jacinta stood quietly, hands folded in front of her apron. Thompson was not standing beside her. He was not at the center of the room. That mattered to her. He had promised not to turn her into a helpless woman waiting to be rescued, and he kept that promise. The evidence had spoken through proper channels. The workers' treatment had become impossible to ignore. The restaurant ownership addressed the staff directly. Schedules would be corrected. Missed overtime would be reviewed and paid. Breaks would be properly respected. Extra tables would not be pushed onto workers without fair support. Disrespectful behavior toward employees would no longer be excused as pressure. For a moment, nobody spoke. Some workers looked at one another like they were afraid to believe it. Jacinta's eyes lowered briefly, not in defeat, in relief. She had spent years watching people work hard while being treated as if exhaustion was part of the job description. Now, for once, their labor was being acknowledged. A worker near the counter wiped their eyes quickly and pretended to adjust a sleeve. Another whispered, "Finally." Jacinta heard it. She smiled softly. When the meeting ended, the dining room felt different, not perfect, not magically healed, but lighter. People moved with a little more room in their shoulders. Someone laughed near the kitchen entrance. A worker who usually stayed silent spoke up to ask a question about the new schedule without fear shaking their voice. Justice had not arrived with shouting. It had arrived with records, pressure, honesty, and accountability. That evening, Thompson came in after the rush had settled. Jacinta walked to his table with coffee, but this time she did not start with a joke. She set the cup down and looked at him. "You kept your word." Thompson looked up. "I tried to." "No, you did." He accepted that quietly. "I didn't want them thinking this was about me." "They don't," Jacinta said. "They know what changed. That's enough." He nodded. She studied him for a moment. "You know, you are a very strange man." That caught him off guard. "Strange?" "Yes. Most people with money want everybody to see their hand moving. You moved yours and stepped back." "I'm learning." "From who?" He smiled faintly. "From a waitress who knows how to turn $5 into a lesson." Jacinta gave him a warning look, but there was warmth in it. "Careful. Don't start making speeches at my table." "No speeches." "Good, because I still have 3 tables who need refills." He laughed, and the sound came easily now. Later, when the restaurant slowed, Thompson asked if she could sit with him for a minute after her shift. Jacinta hesitated, not because she feared him, but because she had learned to be careful when life started offering doors too quickly. After closing duties, she removed her apron, folded it neatly, and sat across from him. "All right," she said. What is it? Thompson placed both hands on the table. I've been working on something. That sounds expensive. It may be. Should I be nervous? No. That's what nervous people say before paperwork appears. He smiled. It's a restaurant project here in Dallas. Community-focused. Good food, fair employment, training opportunities, real advancement. Not just a place that serves meals, but a place that builds people. Jacinta listened carefully. He continued, I want someone involved who understands service from the ground up, someone who knows what workers need because she has been one, someone who understands dignity, not just profit. Jacinta's face became guarded. Thompson, I want you to help manage it. She leaned back slightly. The words hung between them. For a few seconds, the only sound came from chairs being stacked in the distance. Jacinta's first instinct was not excitement. It was caution. Are you offering me this because you feel bad? No. Because of what happened here? Partly because of what I saw here. But not because I pity you. Her eyes stayed fixed on his. I need you to say that plain? He did. This isn't charity. You've already earned my respect. Jacinta did not look away. Those words reached her differently from praise. Praise could be cheap. Recognition had weight. He continued, I'm not asking you to become a decoration for my project. I'm asking you to help shape it. I want your voice in the decisions. Hiring, training, service standards, community partnerships, all of it. Jacinta's lips parted slightly, but she did not speak yet. 1,000 thoughts crossed her face. Rent, bills, long shifts, people she had helped quietly, workers who deserved better. A chance to build something honest. The same words she had once spoken back to him were now standing in front of her. What if I say no? She asked. Then I'll respect that. What if I need time? Then take time. What if I don't know everything a manager is supposed to know? Then we build training into the plan. What if people say I only got it because of you? Thompson's expression softened. Some people will talk no matter what you do. Jacinta gave a small laugh. That part is true, but the work will answer louder than rumors. She looked down at her hands. For years those hands had carried plates, wiped tables, counted small bills, packed quiet envelopes, and served people who often never wondered whether she had eaten. Now those same hands were being invited to help build something bigger, not because she begged, not because she pretended, because someone finally saw leadership in her everyday character. When she looked back at Thompson, her eyes were bright, but she kept her voice steady. I'll think about it. That's fair. I mean, really think. Pray, too. I would expect nothing less. She smiled at that. A quiet moment settled between them. Not the heavy silence of fear. The softer kind that arrives when two people know life may be changing, but neither wants to rush the meaning of it. Thompson stood when she stood. He did not touch her without permission. He simply walked her toward the door like a gentleman who understood boundaries. Outside, the Dallas night was warm, and the streetlights shone against the sidewalk. Jacinta adjusted her bag on her shoulder. You know, she said, if I join this project, we are not serving food that needs a dictionary. Thompson smiled. Noted. And if there are community events, you will learn how to respect paper plates. I've been studying. Good. Because if you embarrass me around foil pans, I may resign before opening day. He laughed. This time, Jacinta laughed with him longer than usual. When the laughter faded, Thompson looked at her with a gentleness he did not try to hide. I like hearing you laugh. Jacinta's smile softened, and for once, she did not cover the moment with another joke immediately. I like when you make sense, she replied. That sounds like progress. It is. He did not push. She appreciated that. Their friendship was beginning to carry something warmer beneath it, but neither of them treated it like a race. Jacinta had dignity to protect. Thompson had humility still growing inside him. Love, if it was going to come, would have to arrive honestly. That night, when Jacinta walked away, Thompson remained by the restaurant entrance for a few seconds. He was not watching her like a man trying to own what he admired. He was watching with gratitude. Because the woman he once tested with $5 had become the person teaching him how respect should look when it finally learned to walk beside love. Months later, the building no longer looked like an empty promise. What had once been a quiet property on a busy Dallas street now carried life, movement, and purpose. Fresh signs were being installed. Tables had been arranged with care. The kitchen had been tested again and again, until Jacinta was satisfied that food could move quickly without workers being treated like machines. She had accepted Thompson's offer after praying, thinking, asking hard questions, and making him explain the plan more than once. Not because she doubted her worth, because she understood that a good opportunity still needed good boundaries. From the beginning, she made one thing clear. If this place is going to serve the community, she told him, then the community cannot be treated like decoration. Thompson nodded. Agreed. And workers need real training, fair pay, and schedules that don't break their bodies. Agreed. And if we hire single mothers, we cannot act surprised when they need flexibility. Life doesn't stop because a shift starts. Agreed. Jacinta narrowed her eyes playfully. You agree too fast sometimes. It makes me suspicious. Thompson smiled. I'm learning when to listen. That is a good answer. Planning was not easy, but Jacinta grew into leadership with a natural strength that surprised everyone except Thompson. She checked menus, she reviewed training plans, she corrected service ideas that sounded nice in business language but made no sense for real workers. When someone suggested a complicated ordering system, Jacinta shook her head. No, if the system needs a prayer meeting before lunch service, it's too complicated. Thompson laughed, but he changed it. Community hiring began slowly, then with growing excitement. People who had been overlooked elsewhere came in for interviews. Single mothers arrived nervous but hopeful. Some had restaurant experience, some did not. Jacinta treated each person with respect because she knew what it felt like to need a chance without wanting pity attached to it. During training, she taught more than how to carry plates. She taught patience. She taught confidence. She taught workers how to speak up when something was unfair. She taught them that service did not mean surrendering self-respect. One afternoon, Thompson watched her guide a nervous trainee through a mock order. Jacinta smiled and said, Slow down. The table can wait 2 extra seconds. Your piece matters, too. The trainee nodded, tried again, and got it right. Thompson stood near the back, quietly proud. Jacinta saw him watching and called out, Don't just stand there looking rich. Bring those menus over here. The room laughed. Thompson picked up the menus without complaint. Yes, ma'am. That became one of the things people loved about him. He did not enter the project acting above the work. Jacinta made sure of that. At one community cookout held to celebrate the new hiring program, Thompson arrived carrying a covered dish someone had handed him at the entrance. He held it carefully with both hands, looking far too serious. Jacinta noticed immediately. Why are you carrying that foil pan like it contains government secrets? He looked down at it. You told me to respect the foil. I did, but breathe. The macaroni can sense fear. People nearby laughed, and Thompson laughed with them. He had learned the rules by then. Do not lift foil without permission. Do not take the last piece of anything unless you are ready for questions. Do not underestimate paper plates. Do not stand too close to the grill giving advice unless invited. At church fundraisers, he learned even more. He learned that people could raise money with laughter, prayer, food, and determination. He learned that community did not need luxury to have power. He learned that a folding table covered with homemade desserts could bring more honest joy than many expensive charity galas he had attended. Jacinta watched him change. Not all at once. Not in a way that felt fake, little by little. He listened more. He spoke less about what money could do and more about what people needed. He stopped trying to solve everything quickly and started asking better questions. Their relationship grew inside those everyday moments. After long planning meetings, he sometimes walked Jacinta to her bus stop, though he always offered a ride first and respected her answer when she chose the bus. At cookouts, she teased him for holding paper plates too carefully. At the restaurant site, he brought her coffee and pretended to ask whether it was serious enough. One evening, after a long training session, they stood near the front entrance of the unfinished restaurant. The chairs were stacked, the lights were low, and the smell of fresh paint still lingered faintly in the room. Jacinta looked around and shook her head. I used to carry plates for people who barely saw me. Thompson stood beside her. Now you're building a place where people will be seen. She glanced at him. That sounded almost like a speech. I kept it short. Good, you're improving. He smiled, then grew quiet. Jacinta, she looked at him fully. Yes? I care about you. The words were simple, but they carried honesty. She had learned not to rush her heart just because someone spoke kindly. I know, she said softly, and I respect you. That one matters more. I know. A gentle smile touched her face. I care about you too, Thompson, but we keep walking slow. He nodded immediately. As slow as you need. She looked around the restaurant again, then back at him. As slow as we both need. That made him smile because she was right. He was still learning too. Months earlier, he had entered a restaurant trying to test a waitress. Now he stood beside her inside a business she was helping shape, surrounded by plans that would feed families, train workers, and open doors for people who had been ignored too long. Jacinta had not become someone new. She had become more fully seen. Ann Thompson, in learning her world through cookouts, church fundraisers, community laughter, honest work, and patient love, had become less impressed with his own wealth and more grateful for the woman who taught him what real richness looked like. Grand opening day arrived with the kind of energy Jacinta had once only dreamed about. The new Dallas restaurant stood bright, welcoming, and full of life. The sign above the entrance was clean and bold. The windows shone, the tables were ready, the kitchen moved with calm order instead of panic. Workers stood in fresh uniforms, smiling with nervous excitement. Jacinta walked through the dining room slowly, checking every corner. Not because she did not trust the team, because she understood what this day meant. This was not only a restaurant opening, it was proof. Proof that workers could be treated with respect. Proof that single mothers could be trained instead of judged. Proof that community could be part of business without being used for attention. Proof that a woman once tested with $5 could help build something worth far more than money. Thompson stood near the entrance, watching her with quiet pride. "You've checked that front table 3 times, he said. Jacinta glanced at him. "And if it misbehaves, I'll check it a 4th. He smiled. "Everything looks ready." She breathed in slowly. "I know." "Are you nervous?" "Yes. That surprises me." "It shouldn't," she said. "Good things can make your hands shake too." Before he could answer, the first guests began arriving. Neighbors came in smiling. Church members filled tables with joy. Families entered with children holding hands. Former co-workers from the old restaurant came too, some emotional, some laughing, some looking around like they could hardly believe. Jacinta was standing there as one of the leaders. Workers celebrated each other. Customers were welcomed warmly. No one was treated like they were invisible. Jacinta moved through the room with confidence, greeting people, checking on the staff, encouraging trainees, and making sure the heart of the place stayed stronger than the noise of the celebration. At one table, a single mother who had completed training wiped her eyes after receiving her first official schedule. Jacinta touched her shoulder gently. "You earned this." The woman nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Across the room, Thompson saw it and lowered his gaze. He had opened businesses before. He had cut ribbons. He had shaken hands. He had stood beside expensive decorations while people applauded. Numbers, profit, and growth. But this felt different. This room had meaning. This room had healing. This room had dignity. After the first meals had been served, Thompson stepped near the front of the restaurant and asked for everyone's attention. The room slowly quieted. Jacinta turned from the counter and looked at him with curiosity. He had not told her he planned to speak. That made her narrow her eyes slightly. Thompson noticed and smiled. "I'll keep it short," he said. A few people laughed. He looked across the room. "Thank you all for being here today. This restaurant exists because Dallas has people who deserve opportunity, respect, and a place where hard work is not ignored." He paused. "But I need to tell the truth about where this began." Jacinta's smile faded into surprise. Thompson turned slightly toward her. "Months ago, I came into a restaurant as a man who thought money could help him understand people. Jacinta served me with warmth, patience, humor, and respect. She corrected a mistake without blaming anyone. She made me laugh on a day when I had forgotten how." The room grew still. Jacinta looked down briefly, already knowing where he was going. Thompson continued. "When the bill came, I did something I am not proud of." He took a breath. "I tested Jacinta with $5. Soft gasps moved through the room. Some people looked at Jacinta. Others looked back at Thompson. He did not hide from their reaction. "I left $5 on purpose because I wanted to see whether her kindness would change when the reward was small." His voice softened, but her response tested me. Jacinta lifted her eyes. Thompson held her gaze. She did not insult me. She did not embarrass me. She did not beg. She simply said, "Thank you, sir. $5 can still help somebody who knows what to do with it." A quiet wave of emotion moved through the room. Thompson nodded toward the entrance. Near the front wall, covered until that moment, was a small frame. He walked to it and gently removed the covering. Inside was the same $5 bill. Below it was written, "Never judge the size of a gift before you know the size of a heart." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then applause filled the restaurant. Not loud for show. Deep, grateful, real. Jacinta pressed one hand to her chest. Thompson walked back toward her, but he stopped at a respectful distance. "That $5 was supposed to reveal who you were," he said. "Instead, it revealed who I still needed to become." Jacinta's eyes shone, but her voice stayed steady. "You learned. I'm still learning," she smiled softly. "That is the best answer." The room laughed gently. Thompson looked at everyone again. "This place is not charity. It is recognition. Jacinta helped build this. Because she earned it. She is not here as a symbol. She is here as a leader." The applause rose again. Former co-workers stood. The new workers clapped proudly. Community members cheered. Jacinta took one slow breath, then stepped forward. She looked around at the room filled with people she loved, people she served, people she now helped lead. "I used to think stability meant finally not being afraid of bills," she said. "Now I understand it also means building something that gives other people room to stand." She turned toward the workers. "This restaurant belongs to every person who chooses dignity, patience, honesty, and service. We are going to feed people well, train people well, and treat people well." Then she looked at Thompson. "And we are going to keep you away from the foil pans unless supervised." The entire room burst into laughter. Thompson placed a hand over his heart. "I accept those terms." The celebration continued. Meals were served, families laughed, workers moved with pride. Jacinta welcomed the first official guests not as the tired waitress people had once overlooked, but as a respected leader and partner in a business built on dignity, opportunity, and service. Later, when the crowd settled and music played softly through the room, Thompson stood beside Jacinta near the framed bill. He looked at it, then at her. "Do you ever regret how you answered me that night?" Jacinta smiled. "No, but I do regret not telling you the coffee was worse than the tip." Thompson laughed so hard he had to look away. Jacinta laughed too. When the laughter faded, he gently offered his hand. She looked at it for a moment, then placed her hand in his. No rush, no show, just two people standing side by side. A man who learned that wealth without humility was empty. A woman who proved that dignity could not be purchased, reduced, or tested away. Their love did not begin with perfection. It began with a lesson. It grew through respect. It became strong through patience. By the end of that night, the $5 bill near the entrance was no longer a reminder of disrespect. It was a reminder that small moments can expose big truths. Kindness is not weakness. Poverty does not remove dignity. Money can open doors, but character decides what should be built inside them. A real man does not use wealth to control a woman. He uses wisdom to respect her. And sometimes, the smallest test reveals the biggest heart. Before you go, family, if this story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to Love, Money, and Secret for more powerful stories with life lessons, love, justice, and hope. Also, comment below, what would you have done if someone tested your hard work with only $5? Because in Jacinta's story, $5 did not define her value. It revealed it.